The dust hung thick in the air of Redemption Creek, a settlement that had earned its name from the second chances it promised but rarely delivered. Sarah Mitchell stood in the center of the town square, her wrists bound to a wooden post, her cream-colored dress already stained with dirt and blood. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the crowd gathered, some faces showing pity, others twisted with cruel anticipation. She had refused him. Refused Marcus Dalton, the richest man in 3 counties, a man who believed his money could buy anything, including a woman's consent. When she had turned down his proposal of marriage in front of half the town at the social last week, his face had gone purple with rage. No one said no to Marcus Dalton. No one. The town marshal, bought and paid for by Dalton's gold, had arrested her on trumped-up charges of theft. The trial, if it could be called that, had lasted all of 10 minutes. Judge Pemberton, another man in Dalton's pocket, had declared her guilty and sentenced her to 20 lashes, to be followed by a choice: accept Dalton's proposal or leave town with nothing but the clothes on her back. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Not Dalton, who stood at the edge of the crowd with his arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on his face. Not the marshal, who held the whip with obvious relish. Not the townspeople who had once been her neighbors and friends but now looked away in shame or worse, watched with morbid curiosity. The first crack of the whip split the air before the leather bit into her back. Sarah gasped, her teeth clenching against the scream that wanted to tear from her throat. The pain was worse than she had imagined, a line of fire across her shoulders that seemed to burrow into her bones. "One," the marshal called out, already drawing back for another strike. She had grown up in this town, had buried her parents in the cemetery on the hill after the fever took them both within a week of each other. She had worked herself to exhaustion keeping their small farm running, maintaining her independence even when other women her age had married and started families. She had been content, even happy, until Marcus Dalton decided he wanted to add her and her land to his collection of possessions. The second lash came, then the third. Sarah's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Her legs trembled, threatening to give out, but she locked her knees and remained standing. She would not collapse. She would not beg. For, somewhere in the crowd, a woman sobbed. Sarah recognized the voice as belonging to Mrs. Henderson, who had taught her to sew when she was just a girl. But Mrs. Henderson's husband worked at Dalton's lumber mill, and she would do nothing to help, just as none of them would. Fear and greed had made cowards of them all. The fifth lash never came. The crack of the whip rang out, but Sarah felt nothing. Confused, she opened her eyes and tried to look over her shoulder. The crowd had gone silent, the kind of heavy silence that precedes either violence or revelation. "That's enough," a voice said, low and dangerous, with an edge like a blade being drawn from its sheath. Sarah's heart, already racing from pain and fear, seemed to skip entirely. She knew that voice, though she hadn't heard it in 6 years. It was deeper now, rougher, shaped by hard living and harder lessons, but unmistakable. Jake Morrison had left Redemption Creek the day after his 18th birthday, riding out at dawn with nothing but his father's old horse and a determination to escape the suffocating expectations of small-town life. He had been wild then, all reckless energy and big dreams, too restless for the boundaries that held everyone else in place. Sarah had been 16, and she had watched him go with a heart that felt like it was being torn in two. Now he stood behind the marshal, the leather end of the whip wrapped around his hand, his other hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. He had changed in those 6 years. The boy who had left had been tall and lanky, all sharp angles and untested confidence. The man who had returned was broader, harder, his face weathered by sun and wind. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his eyes held a wariness that spoke of things seen and done that couldn't be unseen or undone. "Let go of the whip, stranger," the marshal snarled, his hand moving toward his own weapon. "This is official town business." "Official business," Jake repeated, his tone making the words sound like the joke they were. That's an interesting way to describe a man using the law to torture a woman into marrying him. Marcus Dalton pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with anger. "This doesn't concern you, drifter. Move along before you find yourself joining her." Jake's eyes, gray as storm clouds, shifted to Dalton. For a long moment, he just looked at him, and something in that gaze made even Dalton take an involuntary step back. Then Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a cold promise of consequences. "She's already taken," Jake said quietly. "She's my wife." The words hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Sarah's head snapped around so fast her vision spun. Wife. They had been friends once, close friends, maybe even something more in the innocent way of teenagers who don't yet understand what they feel. But they had never been married, never even courted properly. "You're lying," Dalton spat. "Sarah Mitchell has no husband." "Sarah Morrison," Jake corrected, never taking his eyes off Dalton. "We were married in Silver Falls 6 years ago, just before I left for California. Didn't work out the way we planned, me being gone so long, but that doesn't change the law. She's my wife, and if you touch her again, I'll kill you." He said it simply, without heat or bravado, the way a man might comment on the weather. But everyone who heard it believed him absolutely. The marshal looked uncertainly between Dalton and Jake. "Mr. Dalton, if she's already married, the charges of refusing a proposal wouldn't stand. It's not illegal to refuse a man when you're already wed." "He's lying," Dalton shouted, but doubt had crept into his voice. "Prove it. Show me a marriage certificate." Jake reached into his vest with his free hand and pulled out a folded paper. Sarah couldn't breathe as he walked toward the judge, his movements easy and confident, the whip still wrapped around his other hand. He unfolded the paper and held it out. Judge Pemberton took it with shaking fingers, his eyes scanning the document. His face went pale. "It appears to be legitimate," he said quietly. "Signed by a circuit judge in Silver Falls, dated 6 years ago this spring." Sarah's mind reeled. It wasn't possible. How could there be a marriage certificate when they had never been married? Unless Jake had forged it, but the judge had examined it and declared it legitimate. She wanted to protest, to deny it, but something in Jake's posture, in the subtle shake of his head when his eyes met hers, told her to stay silent. "Then these charges are dismissed," the judge said, his voice stronger now that he had an excuse to defy Dalton without openly crossing him. "Marshal, release her. This is absurd." Dalton strode forward, his fists clenched. "I know everyone in this town. I would have known if Sarah Mitchell was married." "Maybe that's why you should have taken no for an answer the first time," Jake said softly. Finally releasing the whip, it fell to the dust at the marshal's feet. A man who won't respect a woman's word probably doesn't deserve to hear it in the first place. The marshal fumbled with the ropes binding Sarah's wrists to the post. When they fell away, her legs finally gave out. Jake was there instantly, catching her before she hit the ground, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. She gasped as his arm pressed against her torn back, and he immediately adjusted his hold, his jaw tightening. "I'm taking my wife home," he announced to the crowd, to Dalton, to anyone who might think about stopping him. "And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me. Tomorrow, after I've had a chance to tend her wounds and we've had time to catch up on 6 years of missed conversations." No one spoke. No one moved. Jake carried Sarah through the parting crowd, past faces she had known her whole life, past the shops and buildings that made up the only home she had ever known. She should have protested, should have told the truth, should have done something other than rest her head against his shoulder and let him take her away from that place of pain and humiliation. He headed not toward her small farmhouse on the edge of town but toward the old Morrison place, where he had grown up. His parents had died years ago, his mother from pneumonia and his father from a broken heart not long after, but the house still stood, maintained by a neighbor who kept hoping Jake would come back someday. Inside, the house was dusty but intact. Jake carried her through to the bedroom and laid her gently on her side on the bed, mindful of her injuries. Then he disappeared, and she heard him moving around the house, the pump working in the kitchen, cabinet doors opening and closing. He returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of whiskey. His hands, surprisingly gentle for their size and obvious strength, carefully eased down the top of her dress to expose her back. She heard his sharp intake of breath when he saw the damage. "I'm going to clean these," he said quietly. "It's going to hurt." It did hurt, but she bit her lip and endured it. He worked with the efficiency of someone who had tended wounds before, his touch careful but thorough. When he finished, he helped her sit up slightly and offered her the whiskey bottle. "Drink," he said. "It'll help with the pain." She took a long swallow, coughing as the liquor burned down her throat. Then she looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who had once been the boy she knew better than anyone. "You forged that marriage certificate," she said. "It wasn't a question. I had it made in Silver Falls 3 days ago," he admitted. "Cost me most of what I had in my pocket, but the forger was good. Good enough to fool Judge Pemberton, anyway." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Why did you come back? Why did you help me?" Jake sat back on his heels, his eyes holding hers. "I heard about what Dalton was doing, about how he was trying to force you into marriage. I was in Millerville when a trader mentioned it, said the whole county was talking about how Marcus Dalton was finally going to get what he wanted. I rode 3 days straight to get here." "But why?" she asked again. "You left. You wanted nothing to do with this town, with any of us." "Not with you," he said quietly. "Never with you. I left because I was young and stupid and thought there was something better out there. Spent 6 years learning that there wasn't. Spent 6 years wishing I'd had the sense to ask you to come with me or the courage to stay." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, the ones she had refused to shed in the town square now threatening to fall in the privacy of this room. "The certificate won't hold up forever. Someone will investigate, will find out it's fake. Maybe," Jake agreed, "or maybe Dalton will decide his pride isn't worth the trouble of admitting he tried to force a married woman to his bed. Either way, it buys us time." "Time for what?" He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Time for you to decide if you want to make that certificate real. I'm not leaving again, Sarah. I'm done running. But I'm also not going to trap you into something you don't want. We can get married for real if you're willing, make you safe from Dalton and any other man who thinks he can claim you like property. Or we can wait until things settle down, and you can tell everyone the truth. I'll face whatever comes." Sarah looked at this man, this complicated mix of the boy she had known and the stranger he had become. He had ridden 3 days to save her from a fate worse than the whipping. He had risked his life standing up to Dalton and the marshal. He had forged legal documents and declared himself her husband when he could have simply ridden past Redemption Creek and never looked back. "You really came back for me," she said wonderingly. "I really did," he confirmed. "Took me 6 years to realize what I'd left behind. Took hearing you were in danger to find the courage to come back and admit I'd been a fool." She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses, the scars, the evidence of 6 hard years written on his skin. "I don't want to wait," she said softly. "I don't want to pretend. If you're really staying, if you really mean this, then let's make it real." Jake's fingers tightened around hers. "You're sure? You're not just saying yes because you're hurt and scared and I'm convenient?" "I'm saying yes because you're the only man who ever saw me as more than something to be owned or managed," Sarah said. "I'm saying yes because you came back. I'm saying yes because maybe, just maybe, we both deserve a second chance at getting this right." He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes closing. "Then we'll do it right this time. I'll court you properly, even though we're already supposedly married. I'll earn your trust. And when we stand in front of a real preacher and say real vows, it'll be because we both want it, not because circumstances forced our hand." Outside, the sun was setting over Redemption Creek, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring questions, challenges, maybe even danger. But for now, in this moment, Sarah Mitchell Morrison felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. And beside her, holding her hand like it was something precious, Jake Morrison felt like he had finally found his way home.